Good morning and welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the formula. We are setting a standard for accountability, the ownership of your choices, and responsibility, that ability to respond to those choices. Let each care for self and all will be cared for.
Ori, when did that start to change? When did the thing that everyone sort of recognized as sort of a liberal bias start to shift into what you call a knee-jerk activist and even scolding quality?
Well, I think it was cumulative. I don't think it was one event. Part of it was Trump's election. Like every newsroom, every legacy media newsroom, we were shocked, disturbed, distraught, really troubled. But I also think, to me, it revealed that we didn't really understand a lot of what was going on in America, that we were out of touch. But after a while, we started covering Trump in a way that we were trying to damage his presidency, to find anything we could to harm him. And I think what we latched on to was Russia collusion, like a lot of news organizations, which was, as I write, sort of catnip, although it was just rumors and a lot of it based on pretty shoddy documents, evidence. It wasn't really solid, but I think it was compelling.
Well, another amazing week of a lot of information coming at us and a lot of what I would say is awakening for a lot of people. Some of this awakening for people it's genuine. You know, they're having their red pill moment, however that gets ignited and activated. And then, you know, they're letting things unfold and they're researching and looking into things. So this particular clip that I had there is from an NPR interview that Barry Weiss, who is a journalist, she basically interviewed this gentleman, Uri Berliner, I think is his name. And he's been with NPR for I guess 25 years. And, you know, he's kind of had, you know, some awakening in the observation that, you know, things are not legit in his industry and that people are, you know, essentially, you know, they are using their bias and their ideology in their reporting. And I thought this particular clip that talked about President Trump, who, you know, Trump was out there, you know, espousing that, you know, the media was biased, they were fake news, they were lying, they were, you know, basically, you know, making up stories or they were slanting their stories. Well, this particular individual who's been in this industry for a very long time, you know, copped to it and admitted that essentially that's what was going on. Now, what's interesting is that he speaks to the idea that, it's going to come up in this next clip with him, that, you know, he felt like, you know, Trump was a person that lacked integrity and all these other things, but he doesn't look at himself to see that he lacks integrity, that he himself lacks character, that he lacks the ability to be in reality and to see things as they are, not what he would wish them to be. And when we pass this through the prism of accountability and responsibility, he's basically shirking both of those things, the responsibility and the accountability, and yet he's pointing the finger at somebody else. And why am I bringing this up? Because when I observe these things and I bring this information, it's for the opportunity to see it differently, to open up to the possibility of what is actually going on, not to see it as you want to see it, but to see it as it actually is, to let it unfold, to let the reality be a part of what you're noticing. There's almost a hypothesis way of addressing this, right? That there's a simple thought. I don't know if this is true, but I'm just going to leave it on the table. And, you know, I have no ideology attached to it. Don't want to force a conclusion, but just allow reality to present. The proving of something cannot be given. right? I can't really prove something to someone. All I can do is present information, and then the proving has to be self-discovered. And over time, less and less proving to a person, and there's no imposing of an internal thought. It's just that over time, there's less proving that a person needs, and more of, I understand what the reality is, and now I need to start my own adventure and my own detective work on what is actually happening in our world. What is it I'm seeing?
But you had a problem with the way that NPR covered his presidency. Here's what you write in the essay. What began as a tough, straightforward coverage of a belligerent, truth impaired president veered toward efforts to damage or topple his presidency. Tell me about what that looked like, Ori, on the inside.
Here was a president who, I believe was belligerent and ill-informed and not a good person by any standard measure of decency. But I think we developed a different standard of coverage for Trump than any other politician. And I think that led us to serious problems in our coverage. I mean, one of them was not so much about Trump, but connected to Trump was the Hunter Biden laptop, where, one of our top news manager, when the Post published this explosive story, said, we're not going to cover this. We're not going to cover stories that aren't stories. And we're not going to let our audience be distracted by this. And, this was right before the election. And, I remember a conversation with a group of us, and, one of the great journalist at NPR, someone who was very fair-minded, said, look, I'm glad we're not covering this because it could help Trump. And this was when I think things were going off the rails in terms of the basic standards of how we cover politicians and stories.
I want to just read that line to you because it's one of the more explosive lines in your essay. You say, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said it was good we weren't following the laptop story because it could help Trump. By that point in his presidency, how normalized had that sort of attitude become? Were you the only one, or were there other people there who heard a statement like that and thought, wait, what business am I in?
So the irony of him making the comment about, Trump, about the president, not being a person of character, and then yet he is revealing himself as not a person of character because he didn't develop integrity in his work, and instead they skewed things and lied and all the rest of it. And it's there for you to listen to. It's a very interesting interview. It's about an hour. I think it's on Spotify. You can pulse through the commercials and everything, which is really nice. But it's just interesting that as these things continue to unfold, and I think if you're watching that, if you're paying attention to what's happening right now, if your life allows for that, and you're listening to this podcast, of course, you're starting to see that there is a momentum that's picking up, that we have crossed a threshold of information. People have access to more information. Most certainly, platforms like X and Truth Social have really offered the opportunity for people to get real-time information. And in many cases, like we've talked about in the past with, all the bloodbath stuff, be able to debunk these things. And as we continue to go down this year, especially in the awakening and towards the election, of course, you definitely want to be paying attention to that, because it's going to come at you fast and furiously as you're going to hear this wrap up of this particular observation from Berliner, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other things that have happened this week in the news that are pretty remarkable in terms of how they're being slanted, how the narrative is coming out, and how they're attempting to manipulate people. Now, we've talked about that, is how do we manipulate people, is that we don't give them a choice and we withhold information.
What we haven't really talked about, what I would like to talk about, is that as this has happened, in both the legacy media and also in conservative media, people don't like us. They don't trust us anymore. They don't believe in what we're selling. And the numbers, I think, are remarkable. And I think it's something that's not really discussed or acknowledged, how severe this is. How, I think it's now like a Gallup poll, about 30% of people believe, that the media will report fully, accurately, and fairly. And I think that NPR is no different. That the level of trust has just plummeted. And I think understandably so. And I'm not just talking about legacy media of all kind. Like, the idea that we are trying to push an outlook. We're trying to shove this into our audience and make them think a certain way. I think it turns a lot of people off.
What are the stakes of that? What does it mean to live in a country in which the media overwhelmingly, it's not that they've just lost trust in a vacuum. They've lost trust because these places have proven themselves to not be trustworthy. People have eyes and ears to see and hear, and they know what they're seeing with their eyes, and they're hearing something really different, either from NPR or The Times, The Washington Post, not to pick on NPR. It could be any of these places. So what are the stakes of it? What does it mean to live in a country where there's plummeting trust in the press?
It's incredibly harmful, and it's frightening. And I think that, media organizations are going to be smaller and smaller and aligned towards very hardened views. And I think it's going to be bad for their business, but more it's bad for the soul of the country. And I don't know where this goes, but I don't think it's going to go someplace good.
I think that that observation of him making the comment that he doesn't think that this is going to go to a good place is correct. I think that I think it's starting to clean itself up, and I think it's fascinating that people like him are willing to come out and, be honest about it and forthright, and to speak to the reality. I thought it was interesting that late in his article, he says that despite our missteps at NPR, defunding isn't the answer. It's like, isn't that interesting? That the person who has a self-interest and a motivation to keep his job doesn't think that his company should be defunded. If this were a business and they had no protections, right, then what would happen? If they found out there was corruption, which is what this is, then they would be fired. And I think it's fascinating that he's advocating for him to keep his job. It's like, well, of course you would. But the last piece of this article that he wrote, I thought had something interesting to say, which was that, quote, with declining ratings, sorry levels of trust, and an audience that has become less diverse over time, the trajectory for NPR is not promising. Two paths seem clear. We can keep doing what we're doing, hoping it will all work out. Or we could start over with the basic building blocks of journalism. We could face up to where we've gone wrong. News organizations don't go in for that kind of reckoning, but there's a good reason for NPR to be the first. We're the ones with the word public in our name, unquote. I just think that's kind of interesting that, it's like, we could keep doing what we're doing. So we've talked about you move towards something or you move away from it. You have the two paths. You have the choice. I think it's interesting that he recognizes that and he speaks to it. Of course, it does not absolve him of his accountability and responsibility, and it doesn't mean that just because he's had this piece of an awakening that he has figured out all the pieces to life. He is just now starting his journey.
The media knows which way the wind's blowing, so they're trying to stir things up. The George Floyd death and the riots that followed energized the base and kept the black vote in the Democrat column. And now the media is trying to run it back. But we caught them. 3 weeks ago, Dexter Reed, out of Chicago, shot by police during a traffic stop. He's black. 100 shots were fired. Here's the family.
Why does the police keep doing this to young black African men? If he was supposed to get pulled over for a traffic stop, why did they have 4 guns pointed at him? He was scared.
He had just bought his new car 3 days before that, and he was just riding around in his car. He said, Mom, I'm going for a ride. And they killed him. They killed him. They killed him.
Reed's family's upset, and we're so sorry. There's nothing like losing a child. But they're not telling you the truth. Dexter Reed opened fire on police. After he was pulled over, he shot at police first, and they returned fire. His gun was recovered, and he'd emptied his clip. We'll show you the video in a second, but look at these headlines. Seatbelt violation ends with black man dead on Chicago street after cops fired nearly 100 bullets. Police fire 96 shots in 41 seconds, killing black man during traffic stop. Deadly Chicago traffic stop where police fired 96 shots raises serious questions about use of force. Not one of those headlines tells you that Reed is the one who started the shootout. The media is looking for another George Floyd to divide and conquer with. And the Chicago mayor is in on it.
So here we go with another story. And again, the reason why I'm bringing this to this forum is to talk about the reality versus the fantasy that the media is telling you a story, they're not telling you the story. How does this have to do with anything that is about the formula, setting a standard for accountability, responsibility, and, living your life at no cost to others, no harm to others. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. What does all that have to do with this? Well, it has to do with the integrity of the story that people are telling, the reality that they are presenting. They want to present a reality that triggers an emotion in people. That whole, if it bleeds, it leads type of thing. You're going to hear that in a little bit from Dana Lash. But what's interesting to me is that it wants to distract you. There are so many of these distractions going on. There's Taylor Swift and the Golden Bachelor guy just got a divorce, and there's this shenanigans and that shenanigans, and everywhere you turn, there's a distraction. Whenever I start seeing a lot of distractions in media, I start questioning, what are you trying to distract me from? You're trying to create a diversion from what is it that you're doing? Because we know from observation that media lies, they lie again and again, and the government lies and they lie again and again, and we know that they've been in cahoots. We've seen all of that. So it really offers itself an opportunity and a landscape to really see what's going on in our world, and then what do I need to do to take care of myself in this environment? How am I accountable and responsible? By having accurate information, being an individual that will research things. And if you're a person that's involved, if you're an activist in politics or some other area, that you really are looking at your integrity and character of going through and finding out the information, researching it deeply, understanding what your topic is, and then making sure that you're not popping off emotionally about something, but instead you're presenting information to people, because that's really all it is, right? Is information, more information. Again, the proving cannot be given. When you have information, all you can do is present it. It has to be self-discovered. You present, and then people can decide. And if you're living in your integrity, you're just being able to present, that's all you got to do.
An interaction with the police, he opened fire on police. And police did what they're trained to do, return fire until the threat to their lives and to the lives of their fellow officers is neutralized. What the media won't tell you is that Dexter Reed didn't want to go back to prison because he was awaiting trial on gun charges. He'd also just been arrested for shoplifting. Viewer warning, this is the body cam footage of the shooting, and it shows a very different story than what the media is presenting.
Roll the windows down.
Roll the window down, man.
Roll the window down. What are you doing?
Roll this one down.
Roll that one down too.
This one down.
Hey, don't roll the window up. Don't roll the window up.
Okay.
Do not roll the window up.
Do not
Unlock the doors now. Unlock the doors now.
door.
Unlock the doors now. Open the door now. Open the door now. Open the door now.
All Reed had to do was comply. Roll down the window, catch another gun charge, serve time, stay alive. But he tried to murder a police officer in cold blood just to stay out of jail. 11 shots were fired by Reed. He only stopped shooting because he ran out of ammo. Now, knowing all of that, this is how CNN described the incident.
Chicago police firing 96 shots in 41 seconds at one man in a deadly traffic stop last month that killed 26-year-old Dexter Reed. Newly released body cam video shows what led to this all. Police say they pulled Reed over for not wearing a seatbelt. When officers approached his SUV, the situation quickly escalated.
Well, why did it escalate, Jake? Police shootings can be complicated, we know, but this wasn't. Are police supposed to just allow themselves to be shot at and then let the shooter drive away? The media also won't tell you this. Some of those officers were black. The one who got shot was black. And trust me, this won't be the first time between now and November that the media tries to pull something like this. So stay alert. Nationally syndicated radio host Dana Lash joins me now. Dana, this isn't even complicated. The fact that they're trying to twist this and sell this as somehow controversial or an egregious act by cops, what does that tell you?
Well, Jesse, it tells me that they need to get out the vote mechanism because Democrats can't sell voters on the economy and they can't sell it on stability internationally. So they have to come up with some way. And racial strife, that's Democrats' calling card. They've been doing this for years.
So one of the things I have liked about this Jesse Waters show is that he's very good about just presenting information. He does a little more editorializing than I care about, but that's just my own preference. I just want to see the information and then, kind of figure it out for myself. I understand, though, his show needs commentary, so, it's all well and good, whatever. I do think it's interesting towards the end of that clip that Dana makes a comment that, things like this are getting released more and more because of what reason? I look at it and I start thinking to myself, is the opposition looking to create another George Floyd situation, as they have indicated here, in hopes that it's going to start, inciting or activating riots and that kind of thing? Again, to be a distraction. A distraction from what? From what? I don't know. I have to wait until the whole picture starts to reveal itself.
Lived through this since we were kids, Jesse. But to this, you mentioned the media with this. Washington Post buried the fact that it was Dexter Reed who fired the first shots. And he didn't just fire shots. Everyone needs to understand, Reed mag dumped into these cops. He emptied his entire magazine into these police. Jesse, if I get pulled over and I mag dump at the cops who are pulling me over and asking me questions, guess what? Same response, because you present a fatal threat to the law enforcement officer, and they are going to use lethal force to neutralize that threat. That is standard operating procedure, and a lot is talked about when it comes to bad policing, but everything that I saw in this video was good policing. These police protected their community from a lethal threat that presented itself to them, and they deserve our thanks, not criticism, not condemnation, not stupid politicians trying to use this to save themselves at the ballot box. They deserve thanks. Now, as far as the media on this, shame on the media. If it bleeds, it leads, Jesse, is a saying for a reason. And they're using this to save their bottom line, to save their ad dollars, and they're using this to help their friends, the Democrats, get reelected. It's shameful. It's sickening. And one last point about the mother who's crying about this. Where were you when your son had his priors? Where were you when your son was illegally in possession of a firearm? Where were you when the recidivism, your son was going from street to prison, street to prison? Where are these parents? They find the cameras fast enough, but they're not there when their kids need them.
To be honest, I really don't have anything to say to that. Dana just, she brings the receipts and, mic drop. I really enjoyed that piece of it where she just speaks the reality. She likes to get a little drama queen, but it's pretty interesting to watch it. But she isn't incorrect. She is very accurate that where were these parents? We keep talking about accountability. Parents are accountable for their children from the moment of inception. They are accountable and responsible, and it's up to them to make sure that they're teaching their children, and on we go with all of that. Okay, I could talk about that forever. This last clip I found the other day, and I just loved it, and it's a different... So we're still talking about how media, politicians, all that shenanigans present to people, or how they try to bend a narrative. They want to bend the reality to their whim. And I thought this gentleman, there's been, talk about, the election coming up and all of the voter ID and all of that. It comes up every year. I mean, I've been watching it now for decades. It's really kind of funny to watch the wash, rinse, repeat cycle. But this guy, I mean, again, another mic drop. I love this when people can speak so articulately about a subject and be able to say so much in so few words. I hope you enjoy this.
I'm here to talk about the left's soft bigotry of low expectations. Because it's the Democrat Party, not the Republican Party, that thinks so little of Black America as a people of color that they'd make the case that being Black in America means we can't obtain a government ID to vote. And that's not only a ridiculous assertion, it's demeaning and it's insulting. When it comes down to it, many of my colleagues on the left like to pretend that we're still living in the 1950s. Well, we're not. I've got some good news for you. It's 2024, and I know what year it is because I've been Black for just over 40 years. And I'm also the son of a retired lieutenant colonel who grew up in the segregated South. You see, my parents grew up in a Jim Crow South in the 50s and 60s in New Orleans, Louisiana. Their next generation, my parents had 3 kids. My sister, brother, and I all went to West Point, all 3 of us. We all served our country in combat. And I sit before you today as a sitting United States congressman in a district in a suburb of Houston, Texas, that's a white majority district, that President Trump would have won by 25 points, and I won by almost 30 points. And that doesn't happen unless we've made some incredible progress in this great nation. Now, my colleagues on the left like to say that common sense voting laws, including requiring a government-issued ID, are racist, discriminatory, and burdensome. Do you know what my father had back in the 40s and 50s before it was even cool? A government-issued ID. And continuing in his footsteps, I too have multiple government-issued IDs, and while that might be shocking to many people in this country, people may ask, how's that happen? It's very simple. It's personal responsibility for all Americans in this country, regardless of what you look like. Sitting with me today is my global entry card, my military ID card, my Texas driver's license, my Texas license to carry, because that's how we roll in Texas, my congressional card, and of course, the good old-fashioned American passport. What sorcery is this? What am I, the Black Houdini? How was I able to pull off the impossible and attain not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 government-issue IDs? Personal responsibility in this country. I fought for this country as an Apache helicopter pilot to protect free and fair elections, and having a government-issued ID isn't racist, it's American. You need to have an ID to drive a car, to check into the airport, open a bank account. You need an ID for basically everything to be a responsible adult in this country, except for voting, apparently, according to the left. Black America does not need well-meaning liberals putting their arms around us and telling us how we should go to the polls. In fact, if you look at recent headlines and polls, you will find that Black men specifically in this country are more fired up than ever to participate in the next presidential election.
Boy, it doesn't get much better than that. Thanks again for joining me this weekend. Please share this with your family and friends. You never know how it might help them in their awakening. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, that link is down below in the comments. Hit the like button if you would please. That's always a great thing. And if you're interested in my book, lulu.com will take you there. See you next week. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.